ILTV Plus, your news from Israel and more 24/7. Start your free trial today. Subscribe at ILTV.tv and watch from any device. Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and before we begin, I want to again quickly remind you not to forget about our all-new streaming platform, ILTV Plus, available on every app store and at ILTV.tv. Now, coming up in today's newscast, with FDA approval finally in hand, Israel beginning to push for vaccinations among children aged 5 to 11. Meantime, lines at the pumps in Iran, an alleged cyber attack shutting down gas stations all across the country. And finally, Catman appearing in court, the strange and heinous story coming up. To begin, the United States FDA finally issuing approval for giving coronavirus vaccines to children aged 5 to 11. And as expected, Israeli authorities are looking to start pressuring parents to vaccinate their kids by mid to late November. Experts saying that children in this age group comprising a massive gap in the road to full herd immunity. With more, Professor Cyril Cohen, head of the immunotherapy lab at Bar Ilan University. Professor, it's great to have you back. Can you discuss now a little bit the data that led to this FDA decision?
Yes, thank you, Aaron. So basically what we saw yesterday in that discussion, that was a 7-hour discussion, was actually the data that showed that those vaccines, we're talking about the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, mRNA vaccine against coronavirus, is quite effective, more than 91% effectiveness, or more than 90% in preventing symptomatic infection. The other thing that we know is that the dose will be a third of the dose that was administered to adults, and that dose is quite, I would say, effective in generating antibodies also in children. So there was a lot of questions because it's a hot debate. You understand that parents might be reluctant, and that makes sense, or hesitant, I would say, in administering such a vaccine, especially if we know that kids are usually, and I'm saying usually, not at risk with COVID-19. Unfortunately, we also know that kids can develop severe disease. Kids were hospitalized. Unfortunately, also kids died of COVID-19, and therefore there was that question asked by the FDA, should we, or I would phrase it like that, is the benefit of the vaccines better than the risk in light of the contamination that we have seen around the world?
Okay, now you touched on this just a little bit a moment ago, but aside from complications with the vaccine, as you mentioned, or as you may know, myocarditis among some of the side effects that seem to have a higher incidence the lower the patient or the recipient of the vaccine is. But you're saying that the benefits outweigh the risks. Now, other issues with the vaccine, there are those who will also point to the fact that children are, again, more rarely seriously ill with COVID. Is it really necessary to vax everyone in this young of an age group?
So this is a good question. Again, it will be dependent, I guess, on the situation of the epidemic in the country, in the defined country. We know that, for example, the United States, and data was actually brought yesterday, the United States has suffered a lot of pediatric cases, more than other countries. One of the risk factors being, for example, obesity. So again, I think that each country will be able to formulate its own policy, meaning, for example, recommending vaccination or actually opening vaccination and letting, more freely parents decide with their medical practitioner, with their doctor, decide should they vaccinate or not. But we cannot say that kids are immune fully to COVID-19, and therefore here is a vaccine. And morally, I would tell you, if we believe that, if we know based on the data that the vaccine is safe or quite safe, I think that there is here a question that each parent has to ask: should he take the vaccine in order to prevent COVID-19, or should he wait, he or wait? And right now, it's true. And I will tell you that we have only data for 3,000 kids in that clinical trial that received the vaccine. Therefore, I can understand the hesitations. I also have to point out that in Israel, already around 300 kids got that vaccine because they have some disabilities, some immune, as are suffering from immune suppression, et cetera, et cetera. So we already have data that also in Israel it works. But on the other hand, We know that you just mentioned myocarditis. We know that for young people between the age of 16 to 18, there was 25, there was these cases of myocarditis that are rare, but we have to take them into account.
I know another update, and if we stick maybe to Israel policy on this, Israel says that it will allow recipients of the Russian-made Sputnik vaccine to enter Israel, provided they get PCR tests and comply with other travel rules. But Sputnik is not recognized by the FDA or the EU or the WHO. Is it wise for Israel, in your opinion, to go against the grain here?
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you here, because I think that there are perhaps some political issues also. But, on the paper, I'll be honest, that vaccine, is quite effective. Again, I would have preferred to have more data, more reliable data. But so far, the data we have seen seems quite convincing that this vaccine is actually protective. Now, we were hoping to have more data. I mean, I'm as an expert, more data showing the efficacy of that vaccine in broad populations. We don't have that data yet, I guess. But again, I think to some extent, if we base our decision only on the technology is quite similar to other vaccines like AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson. Therefore, it would make sense to some extent to consider that vaccine as effective as the other vaccines.
All right, Professor Cohen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.